Storytelling is usually considered the holy grail of tabletop role-playing games such as D&D. It's something sacred whose importance supersedes every other consideration. We all want to know who the big bad is, what horrible end-of-world scheme they're up to, and then experience the challenges and victories of our characters as they set about stopping said big bad. This is the story, and sometimes it's overrated. Think about it. What's one of the biggest complaints you often see about D&D games? It's the dreaded railroad, isn't it? Okay, second to games falling apart because of scheduling or toxic players or game masters ruining the game for everyone else, which is ironic because many of these horror stories we read about feature narrators who stay in the game for much longer than a rational person would. Either they enjoy suffering or they're just making up some BS to score some sweet, sweet Reddit karma. Who knows? Anyway, railroading. You see, on the one hand, we hold up storytelling and the precious story as sacrosanct. And yet, on the other hand, we hold up railroading as filthy, disgusting, and worthy of our deepest disdain. And yet, they go hand in hand, really. That is, you can't have one without the other. And you see, our need for a cohesive, ongoing story in a campaign is almost always what leads to railroading. And it especially leads to a linear campaign, which many people conflate with railroading even though they're wrong. And in this video right here, I explain the difference. But don't watch that right now. That was just a tease. Watch it when we're done here, or at least until you're done leaving a comment about how I have no idea what I'm talking about, how I'm completely wrong, before you even watch this video and know what my point even is. I cannot tell you how much joy it brings me to read angry comments from folks who clearly didn't watch the video. It's a thing of pure beauty. But we got distracted again. My point, at least in the introduction here, is that having a central campaign story arc with a single big bad, the horrible thing they're doing, and then adventures where the characters try to stop them, is what often leads us to railroads and linear adventures, which many players apparently hate. So do we just get rid of the story, throw out storytelling, kill the campaign story arc? Maybe. Hi, I'm Lucar, and on this channel, I share my nearly 30 years of Game Master experience so that you can run amazing games that your players will love. And today we're talking about how to run a tabletop role-playing game such as D&D without a central campaign story arc. And I think we'll find that it doesn't kill the story or remove storytelling from the game. Instead, it makes the story more organic, pushes it more into the player's hands instead of the game master's, and minimizes that railroady or linear feel that many games have. By the way, if you've been enjoying the content I create, perhaps binging on my videos, and you'd like to help support the work I do, please consider becoming a DM Lair patron at the link below. Did you know DM Lair patrons also get loads of D&D 5th edition and Pathfinder 2 Game Master resources they can use in their games? Full-length adventures with digital maps for virtual tabletop use, monsters, traps, puzzles, magic items, encounters, also with digital maps, and more. We also have Foundry packs available. That's right, we don't just hold our hands out and ask for money. We actually give you more awesome stuff when you become a patron. And I think you'll find that our adventures and other resources will help you reduce your prep time and inspire your game sessions. There's a link down below if you'd like to learn more about becoming a DM Lair patron. We even have free trials available, so you really have nothing to lose. What does a game without a central campaign story arc look like? It's a game where the characters are not concerned with the plot and plans of one central villain for the entire length of the campaign. Instead, it's a game where the characters have a series of mostly unrelated adventures where the only connecting thread may be the characters themselves. In my Sword Coast Guards campaign, the characters were striving against Lord Paxton for the entire campaign, thwarting his minions, stopping his evil plans, until they finally fought and defeated Lord Paxton himself. That campaign had a central campaign story arc. However, what if Lord Paxton was just one adventure, and then for the other adventures, they were just roaming up and down the Sword Coast, righting wrongs, kicking a variety of butts, sometimes just delving a dungeon for kicks, and otherwise doing stuff that was not at all interconnected into one grand story. That would be a game without a central campaign story arc. If you've ever watched an action-adventure sci-fi show from before the late 90s like Knight Rider, The A-Team, Star Trek, or MacGyver, you already know how this campaign works. Each episode has a different adventure the protagonists go on, but none of the episodes are really related. However, for those of you who think this style of game gives you an excuse to stop prepping and just wing it, you're wrong. This kind of game is not the GM winging it. Many times a game without a central arc can be more work for the game master. Now it depends on how you run such a game, of course, because as we'll discuss in a moment, there are a few different ways you can run games without central story arcs. More than anything else, a campaign without a central story arc, you know, we're gonna have to rename this term. Let's just call it a player-directed campaign. That describes the concept fairly well, I think. So more than anything else, a player-directed campaign is about maximizing options for the players and their characters. Of course, this type of game may not be for everyone. You might find that you hate it and that you prefer having a central story arc, even if you were then forced to cry online about being railroaded. So why might a player-directed campaign not be a good choice for you? First, for a lot of tabletop RPG players, especially in recent years, there is simply an expectation that a campaign will have a central arc, a central villain, and that there will be a final resolution. And experiencing that particular story play out over the campaign is an immensely enjoyable part of the game for many players. And this brings up an interesting point. You see, this wasn't always the case. In fact, before what's generally known as the Hickman Revolution, most players did not expect a central story. The game was quite a bit different. Now, if you're interested in learning more about the Hickman Revolution, I made this video here a little while back. Of course, a player-directed campaign might be exactly what you need too. The most obvious benefit that we've touched on a few times, so I won't belabor the point, is that it avoids the dreaded railroad, which frankly is a term almost everyone uses incorrectly. What they should say instead is linear campaign, because when people say railroad, that's usually what they mean. A game master can still railroad you when you're playing a player-directed campaign, such as a sandbox. A player-directed campaign can be an excellent choice if you want the players to decide which adventures their characters go on, thus maximizing player agency. Furthermore, from the viewpoint of storytelling, a player-directed campaign embodies emergent storytelling, which gives the players the feeling of being in complete control of their story and their fates. Now, this type of campaign, in a lot of ways, is old school. It's how it was always done before the rise of more cohesive storytelling in tabletop RPGs. And this is the sort of game that the old school renaissance seeks to emulate. Player-directed campaigns are non-linear, allowing the players freedom to explore and discover, bringing a sense of wonder that is often missing from more plot-driven games. This style of game is where the concept of NPC factions originally came from too. Factions provide the players with a choice of which NPCs they want to befriend and gain advantages from, and which NPCs they want to fight against. Sure, there are factions in new school games, but since you're usually assumed to be the heroes, you're limited in which factions you can support and which you can oppose. And that brings us to the next advantage of player-driven campaigns. As a player, you can play a more morally gray character. Shoot, you might even be evil. One of the problems with our traditional heroic storytelling game models is it assumes characters must be generally good, or at least interested in bringing about the greater good. Otherwise, they may have no impetus to go do the thing. The third reason you may wish to run a player-directed campaign is that it's flexible. While some of this style of campaign may require the game master to do a little bit more work at times and be adaptable, it also allows the players to change the trajectory of the campaign on a dime, to go do the thing they want when they want to do it. Player-driven campaigns allow for more big bads, more villains, because there are shorter independent story arcs with a greater variety of creatures and NPC antagonists. In fact, something that I personally dislike about traditional games with a central story arc is the lack of variety in monsters. Like, we have all of these bestiaries filled with amazing monsters, but since we decided to run Storm King's Thunder, we're just gonna have to accept that we'll be fighting a bunch of giants, ogres, and the like for the entire campaign. By the way, giants are one of the most boring creatures in the entire game. for what it's worth. The flexibility of player-driven campaigns extends to player attendance as well. Sometimes these campaigns rotate which characters are even present in certain adventures, and thus removes the expectation that every player must be present at every game session. If you play in a group where some or all of the players aren't always available to play, but you hate having to cancel or reschedule your games all the time, a player-driven campaign could be a perfect solution for you. The trick to making this work is running truly episodic adventures, where an entire adventure is finished in just one game session. Then, whichever players are present, play. And those that aren't may miss out on the game session, but they don't miss out on part of an ongoing story. The next great thing about player-driven campaigns with short, self-contained adventures is that the game master could end or change the campaign at any point if the group decides they want to do something different. There is no feeling of having to make it to the end in order to do something else. But if you started Curse of Strahd and are halfway through, it can be hard to just call it quits and do something else, even if most of the players aren't enjoying themselves. You see, there is this innate need to see how things turn out, even if the game feels like a chore that needs doing at that point. By the way, if you're finding this information useful, please give me a thumbs up, share this video with a fellow game master, and leave me a comment, even if it's to say that I don't suck. I do have a fragile ego, you know. Despite the fact that I chose to put my face and thoughts out here in the open on a public platform, I'm super sensitive, and if all the comments aren't flowery benedictions, I'm likely to just turn comments off. I mean, I'm here to create, not to receive scathing criticism. I'm just an innocent creator. Why are you so mean? How to run a player-directed campaign. There are 3 different ways player-directed campaigns are typically ran. First, you have the pure sandbox. In this style of campaign, players have the feeling they can go wherever and do whatever they want within the constraints of the game world and system. They basically get to choose their own adventure. However, the word feeling was stressed on purpose. You see, even if it seems like I'm an erratic idiot at times, I usually have a goal and overarching evil scheme. Because even with a sandbox game, there are still rails in effect. For me, a sandbox game looks like this. The game master creates the local world and designs a handful of threats and adventures that the players have to choose from. There are still plot hooks and pre-made things to do. We are not talking about a game where the players just wander about randomly and try to scare up something to do while the game master improvises everything on the spot. No, a pure sandbox is populated with stuff to do. The players just get to choose their poison from the menu. However, that said, in a sandbox game, it is possible for players to wander off the rails and go somewhere or do something the GM hasn't prepared. Of course, the same is possible, even likely, in every other sort of game, including pre-made adventure modules. I'm not sure there's very much a GM can do to stop players from doing this from time to time, and I mean, unless they expressly forbid it and just tell them no when they try. Now, one of the most well-known forms of sandbox games is the hex crawl, where the characters explore the wilderness one hex at a time, discovering points of interest and adventures along the way. If you want to learn more about running hex crawl adventures, I have a very fine video on my channel that discusses it further. Next, you have the West Marches game. This form of sandbox maximizes flexibility. Players can drop in and out on game sessions, allowing the group to avoid a hard set schedule or worry about a player missing a game session. Players and characters can change from session to session, and adventures are usually short enough to be run in a single game session. The essence of a West Marches game is that the players decide what they want to do or where they want to go to explore the world. And then, and only then, the game master creates that adventure or fleshes out that part of the game world for them to explore. Now, the GM still has control over the details of the adventure or world. They're still creating and running their own game. It's just that the players are directing the campaign at a high level. For instance, of your 7 players, let's say 5 of them want to go to an abandoned tower they heard a rumor about in the inn. They tell the game master that's their plan, and the game master fleshes out the abandoned tower with a villain, some baddies, treasure, and the like. And then those 5 players go on that adventure in the next game session. The other 2 players sit the game out, probably because they were unavailable to play for whatever reason. And then at the end of the adventure, the characters end up back in town or wherever their central hub is, where they can gather whatever player characters are available for the next adventure they decide to go on. West March's campaigns focus on exploration, discovery, treasure, and the advancement of the characters and their own personal goals. Stories are developed over the adventures, of course, but they're not the focus of the game, and there is no overarching campaign storyline or plot, unless the players want there to be, because they're literally directing where they go and what they do. The third way to run a sandbox game is a patron-focused game, which is, at least in D&D circles, often referred to as an Acquisitions Incorporated style of game. This is where the characters are members of a larger group, association, organization, or company that serves as their patron. Basically, the patron offers the group various assignments or missions that they might go on, and then the players usually get to pick the ones they're most interested in. In exchange for furthering the goals of their patron, the characters gain distinct benefits in the game. Using the example of Acquisitions Incorporated, often shortened to AC Inc., the players' characters own a franchise of the larger AC Inc. company, which has a home office where company leadership, the C-suite if you will, governs. Now, the characters have goals such as expanding the business, spreading the company's brand, and making money in exchange for benefits from home office such as headquarters, magic items, and other corporate perks. Now, in the AC Inc. campaign I ran, home office would offer the characters a choice of cases or assignments to take, and those would be the group's adventures. However, you could also run a patron-focused game with a mix of West March's style, where the characters decide what to do independent of their patron's input. Quick tips. At this point, you should have a good idea of how to run these three different types of player-directed campaigns, but here are some important tips that should help you along the way. Number one, if you plan to offer a menu of adventure options to your players, only prep the framework or outlines or general idea of each of the adventures, each of the options on their menu. Then provide the characters with a list of adventure hooks or rumors to choose from. Taverns and town job boards are often great ways to do this. And ask your players to choose which one they want to do. Then you just prep that adventure and run it at your next game session. Number two, keep your players accountable. If they say they want to go do X thing and you prep X thing, and then at the next session they say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we actually decided to go do Y. We know you kind of already prepped X, but you know, we hate you, so yeah. Put your foot down. It's okay to tell them no. It's okay to hold them to what they said they were going to do. And if they are adamant about going and doing Y, well, you could always just end the game session right there and tell them that you'll prep for it next time. Never get married at the point of a shotgun, my friends. Never. Number three, since you still have control over the details of the adventures the characters go on, you have some wiggle room to make things feel interconnected if you want to. You could use reoccurring creatures or villains to link some of the adventures together, or you could have a central faction that laces through all or most of the adventures. Furthermore, you can inject elements from character backstories into the adventures to forge a deeper connection between players and the adventures and the game world. But that's just what I think. How do you run player-directed campaigns? And don't forget to learn more about becoming a DM Layer patron at the link below. Now, if you'd like to learn several tricks to engaging players and making them fall in love with your games, check out this video right here. And until next time, happy game mastering.